In today's lesson, we are going to talk about selecting pixels using a variety of different tools that we have in Photoshop. So before I get started talking about why we want to select pixels, let's go and get our file that we need. So you can open up your Google Classroom, and remember this is going to look a little different because mine's in the teacher view, but we are going to download the PSB1. It looks like a puzzle with a hot air balloon. So as this is downloading and you're getting it open in Photoshop, I'm going to talk about what selecting pixels mean. So it's easy to see why we would want to select pixels in this image, because obviously we're going to try to put our pieces back together just like a puzzle. The reason that we would select pixels any other time is essentially to remove the background from an object and then put it onto a new graphic that we are creating in Photoshop. So when I say selecting pixels, or if I say in instructions on a yearbook that you should be selecting graphics, that means that you don't want to put the entire photo on your graphic you're creating. You should be selecting a part of the image that you want to use and bringing that over and using it in your graphic. So the way that we go about making selections like this is using something called our Marquee tools. Marquee simply is the selecting tools that are in Photoshop. So this is going to be up in our first section here. It's actually the second tool down. Now, my default one that's selected is the elliptical marquee. I think that your default one should be your rectangle, but if it's not, it's okay. All you need to do is, if you can see, I know it's kind of hard, but if there are tools that are hidden underneath that tool, you're going to have a little white triangle in the lower right-hand corner of that tool. So all you have to do is click and hold, and that will open up and allow you to see the other tools that are underneath it. So to start with, we're actually going to start with our rectangle marquee tool. So go ahead and select that. And then what we're going to want to do is select our item number 1. Now I want you to just watch first. I don't want you to do it with me. I'm going to explain why it's really important to zoom in. So right now what you could do is you could attempt to line up as best you could your little crosshair and then click and drag down and make the selection. Now, as close as I think I am, you're going to see that I still have, if I click and bring this over here, oops, I dragged my marquee. I have to grab my move tool. As you can see, I still have a little bit of a white outline, and I didn't do a very great job of selecting my square. So I'm going to use my history panel. I'm just going to move back here. And what I want you to do now is follow with me. We're going to get our zoom tool, and we are going to zoom in to number 1. And I always say it's best to get it as close as you can to the center of the page, as big as you want it to be, so that you can still see everything, because you don't want to be scrolling when you're trying to make a selection. So once you have it nice and large in the center of your screen, then we're going to go ahead and grab our marquee tool. And the marquee is a crosshair. If you don't like the crosshair, you can turn your caps lock on and you'll see it'll kind of turn almost, it's still a crosshair, but it isn't as solid. If you like that look, you can. To turn it off, you just click off your caps lock. Okay, so then we're going to go up to the top left corner and we're going to line it up as best as we can. And then we're going to click and drag down to the lower right hand corner, again lining up as best as we can, and release. If at any point you make an error or you slip or your mouse gets bumped, that's totally okay. To deselect an object, all you need to do is do Control D on your keyboard, and you'll see that your little marquee goes away. So I'm going to select again, and release. So as you can see, the marquee is actually this little black and white dotted line. It almost looks like it's moving, and that is the selection that you have made. So now what we want to do is we want to move this into our puzzle piece. So what we do is we double click our hand tool, we grab our move tool. The move tool is the very top tool on our toolbar. And you'll see when you hover over your selection that it actually turns into a little black arrow with a scissors. And that just means that we're going to move our selection and we're going to place it right into that square and line it up as best we can. Now, once you have it kind of close, you can actually zoom in again if you want to. And you can move your marquee around if you have your move tool selected. You can move your marquee around with the arrow keys. So I'm actually clicking my arrow keys on my keyboard right now, and it allows me to just position it 1 pixel at a time. And so once I have it all lined up the way I want it to be, I'm going to do a Control D to deselect, and I've put my puzzle piece in on the bottom. Done a nice job. You can see there's no white parts there. So that's how we make a selection and move it into place. Now, the other thing I want to talk about briefly is you can see we also have puzzle pieces number 2 and 3. One thing that you can do with a marquee tool is you can add to a selection, and you can also subtract from a selection. So we're going to do number 2 first, which is adding to a selection. So once again, I'm going to get my zoom tool out. I'm going to zoom in on number 2. Nice and big and centered in my workspace here. And then I'm going to grab my marquee tool. So actually what we're going to do is we're going to select this first square first. So I'm going to start in the very top upper left hand corner, line it up as best as I can, and then go down and make that selection. Now, in order to add to a selection, you need to hold your Shift key down at the same time. So what I'm going to do is I actually need to start from this corner because it lines up better. You could attempt to start over here. I wouldn't recommend it. It's not a great idea. So I'm going to start down on this corner. Before I click, I need to make sure that I have my Shift key selected, because watch what happens when I hold my Shift key down. Do you see that we get that little plus sign? That means that we're going to add to the selection. So I need to make sure that my Shift is selected. I have that extra little plus sign, and then I line it up and I drag up to the upper left and try to line that up on my 2 sides, and then I release. And once you have released your mouse, you can let go of your Shift key, and what you should have is the entire 2 squares selected. Now, if that didn't work for you and you messed it up, that's fine. Take a moment here. We can always pause the video and practice a few times making that selection. And remember to get rid of your selection. If you screwed up, you just do a Control D, deselect, and try again. No problem. I know it's a little finicky trying to get used to using the mouse. So do your best. When you are ready, however, we are going to move this into place. So once again, we get our move tool. We hover over our selection and we drag it over and put it into place on our hot air balloon. And I like to, like I said, always zoom back in, and then with my move tool selected, use my arrows to line it up so that I don't have any white showing, or try not to have any white showing. And then when you're done, you do a Control D and it blends in pretty seamlessly. So that's adding to a selection. Now our last one for this rectangle marquee is to talk about doing our subtracting from a selection. So let's zoom in once again on shape number 3. And we're going to start by using our rectangular marquee, just like normal, to select the outside. So starting on the outside, we're going to line up, click and drag to select, and then release, and we have our outside selected. Now to remove a piece of the selection, because obviously we do not want this white rectangle here, to remove part of a selection, we hold our Alt key down. Okay, so our Alt key will subtract from a selection, Shift will add. And you'll see this because if you hold your Alt key down right now, you'll see how you get the little minus sign. Do you see that on my cursor? If you hold your Alt key down, you get your little minus sign. So now all we do is we line it up and try to remove that little white piece. Now you can see right here, I'm going to have to do mine again. And that's okay. Even having done this for almost 10 years, I still make mistakes. You can see I grabbed some of my red. So I'm going to start over. I get my marquee. I do my outside one first. And then I hold my Alt key down. Having a hard time this time. That is okay, everybody. You just keep practicing. If you've got it down and you're ready to move and position, you go right ahead. I'm going to hope that this works on my third try. If it doesn't, we might just have a little bit of a white line. Okay. So I think I have it pretty lined up. It might be a little off, but that's okay. We'll try. So we grab our move tool, move it on over. And then again, like I said, I always like to zoom in. Grab my move tool and line it up and then deselect. So we have used all 3 of our marquee tools for the rectangle. In the next video, we'll talk about using our elliptical marquee tool before working with a few other ones to do pieces 5, 6, and 7.